Remember when eating out meant something more than drive-thrus and delivery apps? Before the golden arches conquered every corner, before pizza chains promised 30 minutes or less, there was a different kind of food revolution happening on American streets. Walk with me through any American city in 1920 and you'd smell it in the air. The sizzle of something called chop suey wafting from basement restaurants. The snap of pickles from sidewalk barrels. The yeasty promise of soft pretzels from German bakeries. These weren't just foods, they were edible passports, each bite carrying stories from distant shores. Today we call them American classics, but every single one started as an immigrant's attempt to recreate home in a strange new land. What they created instead was something entirely new, something that would fundamentally reshape how Americans eat, what they crave, and even how they celebrate. These 15 forgotten immigrant foods didn't just feed America, they invented American food as we know it. So grab a napkin and prepare your taste buds as we travel back in time to discover the immigrant foods that built the American palate, one forgotten dish at a time. First up, chop suey. If you walked into any restaurant in 1920 America and ordered the most popular dish in the country, they would not serve you a burger or fried chicken. They would bring you a steaming plate of chop suey. This mysterious Chinese concoction captured American hearts and stomachs decades before anyone had heard of General Tso. By the 1920s, over 500 chop suey houses operated in New York City alone. That was more locations than Subway has in Manhattan today. The dish supposedly meant odds and ends in Chinese, though that is actually a myth. The original Toisanese name meant chopped organs because authentic chop suey contained gizzards, giblets, and intestines. But here it gets interesting. Chinese immigrants quickly learned that Americans were not ready for authentic organ meat stews, so they adapted. Out went the exotic ingredients, in came familiar chicken and beef. They kept the vegetables though, introducing Americans to bean sprouts, water chestnuts, and bok choy for the very first time. The thick, gloopy sauce that defined American chop suey was nothing like anything served in China. It was sweet, mild, and completely non-threatening to American palates. Restaurant owners marketed it brilliantly. They called it the standard Chinese dish, even though most Chinese immigrants had never heard of it before coming to America. By 1930, you could buy chop suey in a can at your local grocery store. L.A. Choi made millions selling this thoroughly American invention back to Americans as exotic foreign food. The dish became so mainstream that jazz musicians wrote songs about it. Hollywood stars were photographed eating it. It was the avocado toast of its era, trendy everywhere and completely misunderstood. Today, chop suey has virtually disappeared from Chinese restaurant menus, replaced by dishes that are ironically even less authentic. But for nearly a century, this forgotten food taught Americans to use chopsticks, introduced them to soy sauce, and proved that immigrant foods could become more American than apple pie. Now, let's talk about pastrami on rye. In 1880, if you were a Jewish immigrant from Romania or Russia, you came to America with memories of special occasion meats you could rarely afford. Back in the old country, a piece of beef was a luxury saved for holidays. But in New York's Lower East Side, something magical happened. Beef was cheap, cheaper than anyone could have imagined. Jewish butchers began recreating the cured meats of Eastern Europe, but with an American twist. They used brisket, a kosher cut that was tough and needed special treatment. They covered it in black pepper, coriander, and garlic, spices that told the story of the Turkish and Romanian influences from back home. Then they smoked it slowly until it became something transcendent. By the 1930s, over 3,000 Jewish delis operated in New York City. Today, fewer than 30 remain. But during their golden age, these delis weren't just restaurants. They were secular synagogues where second-generation Jews could feel successful, American, and Jewish all at once. The pastrami sandwich they created was absurdly, gloriously American in its excess. Meat piled so high you could barely fit it in your mouth. This wasn't how anyone ate in Europe. This was abundance. This was America. The combination of pastrami with rye bread and mustard created a flavor profile that would influence every sandwich that came after. The idea of the overstuffed sandwich, the deli counter, the pickle on the side, all of this came from Jewish delis. When celebrities started frequenting places like Katz's and the Carnegie Deli, pastrami became glamorous. You weren't just eating lunch, you were participating in New York culture. Today's sandwich shops, sub shops, and even Subway owe their existence to what Jewish immigrants created with pastrami. They didn't just make a sandwich, they invented an entire way of eating. Speaking of German influences, let's discuss the pretzel. The year is 1710, and German immigrants from the Palatinate region have just arrived in Pennsylvania. They bring with them a recipe for bread twisted into the shape of praying arms, a shape that supposedly dates back to medieval monks. By the 1870s, these weren't just snacks, they were strategic business tools. German immigrants had come to dominate the American beer industry. They founded Pabst, Schlitz, and Anheuser-Busch, and they discovered something brilliant. Salty pretzels made people thirsty, very thirsty. Saloons gave them away for free, knowing customers would buy more beer. One New York saloon went through 3 barrels of pretzels per week. That's thousands of pretzels, all designed to sell more beer. But then came 1917 and World War I. Suddenly, anything German was suspicious. The Los Angeles Times declared pretzels too German to be taken seriously. Sauerkraut was renamed Liberty Cabbage. German Shepherds became Alsatians. The pretzel's survival seemed doubtful. Prohibition in 1919 should have been the final blow. No saloons meant no need for bar snacks. But pretzels adapted. They became a street food, sold by vendors who kept them warm on charcoal braziers. Pennsylvania Dutch communities kept the tradition alive, perfecting both hard and soft varieties. When Prohibition ended, pretzels were ready for their comeback. But the real revolution came in 1935 when the Reading Pretzel Machinery Company invented the automatic pretzel twister. Suddenly, pretzels could be mass-produced. Pennsylvania became the pretzel capital of America and still produces 80% of all American pretzels today. The pretzel didn't just survive Yemen, it became the blueprint for American snack food. The idea of salty snacks designed to make you consume more, that's the pretzel legacy. Every chip, every bar nut, every stadium snack owes something to those German immigrants who figured out that salt plus carbs equals profit. Time for spaghetti and meatballs. Here's something that will shock every Italian grandmother. This dish does not exist in Italy. Not in Rome, not in Naples, not in Sicily, nowhere. It is as American as baseball and just as manufactured. Italian immigrants arriving between 1880 and 1920 came from regions where meat was scarce and precious. In southern Italy, you might have pasta on Sunday. You might have a small meatball as a special treat, but you would never, ever put them together. That would be like putting ice cream on pizza. It just was not done. But America changed everything. Meat was affordable here, shockingly affordable. These immigrants who had survived on vegetable soups and stale bread suddenly could afford beef and pork every day. So they did what immigrants do. They adapted and they over-adapted. Those tiny Italian polpette, meatballs the size of walnuts. In America, they became baseballs. That simple tomato sauce made from fresh tomatoes, it became a thick, sweet, red gravy made from canned tomatoes because canned goods were modern and cheap. The marriage of pasta and meatballs happened because Americans expected substance. A plate of plain pasta seemed poverty-stricken, but pile it high with giant meatballs, and suddenly it is a feast. Italian-American restaurants discovered that Americans wanted abundance, not authenticity. They wanted their plates overflowing. They wanted to feel like they were getting value. By the 1950s, spaghetti and meatballs had become so American that when Italians visited from Italy, they were confused. What was this strange dish being sold as Italian food? Chef Boyardee made millions selling canned spaghetti and meatballs, cementing its place in American culture. Today, more Americans can make spaghetti and meatballs than any actual Italian dish. It became comfort food, family food, first date food. It created the template for American Italian restaurants. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in Chianti bottles, and massive portions. None of it authentically Italian. all of it authentically American. Next, fortune cookies. Every year, 3 billion fortune cookies are produced in America. That's 10 cookies for every single American, all carrying their little prophecies and lucky numbers. But here's the twist that would make any fortune writer smile. These Chinese restaurant staples are about as Chinese as apple pie. The fortune cookie was actually invented by Japanese immigrants in California around 1914. They were based on Japanese temple crackers called senbei, which sometimes contained fortunes called omikuji. A Japanese gardener named Makoto Hagiwara served them at the Japanese Tea Garden in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. They were larger, made with sesame and miso, and the fortune was wedged in the fold, not hidden inside. So how did a Japanese cookie become the symbol of Chinese restaurants? World War II changed everything. When Executive Order 9066 forced Japanese Americans into internment camps, their bakeries closed. Chinese restaurateurs, who had been buying these cookies from Japanese bakeries, took over production. They realized Americans expected dessert after meals, something traditional Chinese cuisine rarely provided. The fortune cookie filled that void perfectly. By the 1960s, fortune cookies had become so associated with Chinese food that most Americans assumed they were ancient Chinese tradition. Edward Louis mechanized production, creating machines that could fold and insert fortunes automatically. Wonton Food in Queens now produces 4.5 million fortune cookies daily. They employ a chief fortune writer who creates new prophecies each year, carefully crafted to be optimistic without being specific. When American companies tried to introduce fortune cookies to China in the 1990s, the Chinese were baffled. Some accidentally ate the paper fortunes. Others thought it was some kind of American practical joke. The cookies failed spectacularly. They were, the Chinese said, too American. The fortune cookie's real fortune? It proved that immigrant foods do not have to be authentic to be meaningful. Sometimes the fake becomes more real than the original. Let's move to beer and sauerkraut. German immigrants didn't just bring beer to America. They transformed drinking culture entirely. Before the 1840s, Americans drank whiskey, rum, and hard cider. Beer was considered effeminate, foreign, suspicious. Then came 1 million German immigrants in a single decade, and everything changed. They didn't just drink beer, they built beer. Adolphus Busch, Frederick Pabst, Joseph Schlitz. These were not just brewers, they were industrial revolutionaries. They introduced lager, which required cold fermentation, and that led to refrigeration technology that would eventually transform all of American food storage. By 1880, German Americans owned virtually every major brewery in America. They created beer gardens where entire families could socialize, introducing the radical idea that drinking establishments did not have to be dens of vice. But Germans brought more than beer. They brought sauerkraut, which Americans initially called Liberty cabbage during World War I because sauerkraut sounded too German. The irony was that sauerkraut was not even originally German. The technique came from China more than 2,000 years ago. Brought west by Mongol traders, Germans perfected it as a survival food. Fermented cabbage could last through brutal winters when fresh vegetables were impossible. In America, sauerkraut became the perfect accompaniment to another German innovation, the hot dog. The combination of fermented cabbage on a sausage in a bun became so American that we forgot it was ever foreign. By the 1920s, you could not have a baseball game without beer and hot dogs with sauerkraut. You could not have a picnic without German potato salad. You could not have Oktoberfest without pretzels. German food had become so American that when World War I made German culture suspicious, Americans had an identity crisis. How could they hate Germans while eating Frankfurters? The solution was to rename everything. Frankfurters became hot dogs. Hamburg steak became Salisbury steak. But you cannot rename flavor. German immigration gave America its brewing industry, its preservation techniques, and its love affair with processed meats. Now, corned beef and cabbage. Every March 17th, millions of Americans eat corned beef and cabbage to celebrate their Irish heritage. There is just one problem. This meal is about as traditionally Irish as fortune cookies are Chinese. The Irish did not eat corned beef. They could not afford it. Back in Ireland, beef cattle were too valuable for milk and farm work to slaughter for meat. The Irish ate bacon when they could afford any meat at all. The transformation happened on the streets of Manhattan's Lower East Side. Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine found themselves living next to Eastern European Jews. Both groups faced discrimination. Both were considered non-white by the Protestant establishment. Both found solidarity in their shared struggles, and the Irish discovered Jewish delicatessens. Jewish corned beef, made from kosher brisket, tasted remarkably similar to Irish bacon. It had the same salty, fatty satisfaction. But it was affordable in America in a way beef never was in Ireland. The Irish bought their corned beef from kosher butchers, paired it with cabbage, the cheapest vegetable available, and created a new tradition. By 1861, corned beef and cabbage was so established that Abraham Lincoln served it at his inaugural luncheon. Think about that. In the middle of the Civil War, the president chose an Irish immigrant dish to celebrate taking office. Except it was not really Irish. It was Irish American, Jewish American, immigrant American. Today in Dublin, if you order corned beef and cabbage, they will serve it to you in the tourist restaurants, because they know Americans expect it. The meal that millions consider traditionally Irish exists primarily to satisfy American expectations of what Irish food should be. The Irish-American transformation of St. Patrick's Day from a religious feast to a celebration of corned beef and green beer is purely American too. Ireland did not start having parades until the 1970s, imported from America. Pizza time. In 1905, Gennaro Lombardi opened America's first pizzeria in New York's Little Italy. What he served would be unrecognizable to modern pizza lovers. It was thin, charred, with maybe some tomato and oil. Cheese was extra and unusual. Pizza in Naples was street food, eaten standing up, folded in half like a sandwich. It was working-class sustenance, not cuisine. But Americans had different ideas. They wanted toppings, lots of toppings. They wanted cheese, massive amounts of cheese. They wanted thick crusts that could hold the weight of their ambitions. Pepperoni? That's American. Italians don't even have a word for it. Hawaiian pizza with pineapple? That's Canadian actually, but born from American pizza culture. Chicago deep dish, New York thin crust, California gourmet, all American inventions that would horrify Neapolitans. World War II changed everything. American soldiers stationed in Italy discovered pizza and came home craving it. Suddenly, every town needed a pizza joint. The Americanization was complete when pizza became divorced from Italian identity entirely. By the 1960s, pizza was just pizza. Not Italian food, but American food that happened to have an Italian name. Today, Americans eat 3 billion pizzas a year. That's 46 slices per person annually. Pizza generates more revenue than all other ethnic foods combined. Italy? They've started importing American-style pizza back to Italy to satisfy tourists who expect thick crusts and excessive toppings. The student has become the teacher, and the teacher is confused. Now, bagels. The bagels' journey from Jewish bakeries to American breakfast tables is a story of persistence, preservation, and the power of the freezer. Eastern European Jewish immigrants brought bagels to America in the 1880s. But these weren't the bagels, you know. They were smaller, denser, chewier. They were hand-rolled, boiled in water, then baked in wood-fired ovens. The process was so specialized that bagel bakers formed their own union, Local 338, which controlled all bagel production in New York until the 1960s. You literally couldn't make bagels commercially unless you were in the union, and membership was often hereditary. Bagels remained ethnic food until Murray Lender changed everything in 1960. He figured out how to freeze bagels without destroying their texture. Suddenly, bagels could be shipped nationwide. They could sit in suburban freezers next to TV dinners and orange juice concentrate. The bagel went mainstream, but mainstream meant changes. Bagels got bigger, softer, sweeter. They came in flavors that would make traditional bakers weep. Blueberry bagels, chocolate chip bagels. The everything bagel, invented in the 1980s, became more popular than plain. Cream cheese, originally called Schmierkäse by German immigrants, became the essential pairing. But cream cheese with lox? That combination was invented in America. In Eastern Europe, preserved fish was survival food. In America, it became Sunday brunch luxury. By the 1990s, bagel shops were everywhere. They weren't Jewish anymore. They were American. Dunkin' Donuts sells more bagels than donuts. McDonald's serves bagel sandwiches. The bagel became so American that when American chains tried to introduce them to Europe, Europeans thought they were a new American invention. Time for hot dogs. The hot dog is so American that we eat 20 billion of them each year. That is 70 hot dogs per person. On July 4th alone, Americans consume 150 million hot dogs. But the hot dog's journey to American icon status began in German butcher shops. Frankfurt and Vienna both claim to have invented the sausage, which is why we call them Frankfurters and Wieners. German immigrants sold them from push carts in the 1860s, calling out, "Get your red hots." The sausages were served on plates with mustard and sauerkraut. The bun was an American innovation, supposedly invented at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair when a vendor ran out of plates. Nathan Handwerker, a Polish immigrant, created Nathan's Famous in 1916 on Coney Island. He undercut the competition by selling hot dogs for 5 cents when everyone else charged 10 centimes. He reportedly paid doctors to eat at his stand in their white coats, so people would think his hot dogs were healthy. Hot dogs became the first sports food when they were introduced at baseball parks in the 1890s. The combination of baseball and hot dogs became so intrinsically American that it was used as a test of patriotism. Roosevelt served them to the King of England. Soldiers in World War II called them tube steaks. But here's the thing about hot dogs. Nobody wants to know what is in them. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 was partially inspired by horror over what went into sausages. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle described the sausage-making process in such detail, it turned some Americans vegetarian, temporarily, because hot dogs were too delicious, too convenient, too American to give up. The hot dog proved that immigrant foods could become so American that we would rather not know their origins. Let's talk gyros. In 1965, George Apostolou served what he claimed was the first gyro in America at his Parkview restaurant in Chicago. But the history goes deeper. Greek immigrants had been arriving since the 1890s, but the massive wave came in 1922, refugees from Asia Minor bringing their Ottoman-influenced cuisine. The gyro, spinning meat on a vertical rotisserie, was their gift to American fast food. The technique came from Turkish doner kebab, but Greeks made it their own with different seasonings and that essential tzatziki sauce. Chicago became gyro central. By the 1970s, Chicago Greeks had figured out mass production. They created hydraulically compressed cones of processed meat that could be shipped frozen nationwide. Kronos Foods, founded by Chris Tamaris, became the McDonald's of gyro meat, producing millions of pounds annually. Today, 300,000 gyros are consumed daily in America. Greek immigrants did not just give us gyros, they gave us the 24-hour diner. Before Greeks, restaurants closed at respectable hours. Greeks introduced the radical idea that Americans might want eggs 3 in the morning. The Greek coffee shop became so standard that every diner in America, even those run by non-Greeks, serves Greek salad and rice pudding. The shiny metal exterior, the neon signs, the 12-page menus, the surly but efficient service, all Greek innovations. When Greeks say they invented hospitality, they are not kidding. They just packaged it in spinning meat and infinite coffee refills. Pickles. The pickle barrel on the street corner. The pickle on the side of your sandwich. The pickle in your martini. All immigrant innovations that transformed American eating. Eastern European Jews brought kosher dills. Germans brought sweet gherkins. Polish immigrants brought half sours. Each group had their own technique, their own special brine, their own family secrets. On the Lower East Side in 1900, pickle vendors lined the streets. You could buy a pickle for a penny, eating it wrapped in wax paper as you walked. It was the original street food, portable, cheap, flavorful. Pickles were sold in movie theaters as snacks in the 1920s, before popcorn took over. Henry Heinz, son of German immigrants, industrialized pickles in the 1860s. His 57 varieties included multiple pickle types. He put them in glass jars so people could see the quality, revolutionary, at a time when most foods came in opaque containers. But pickles were more than food. They were preservation technology that allowed immigrants to maintain flavors from home. That dill pickle with your pastrami sandwich isn't just garnish. It's 1,000 years of Eastern European preservation knowledge, fermented into American culture. Hamburgers deserve their moment. Yes, the hamburger is the ultimate American food. But it started as Hamburg steak, brought by German immigrants who had been eating seasoned, raw chopped meat since the Middle Ages. The transformation to sandwich form is claimed by multiple inventors between 1880 and 1900. But White Castle, founded in 1921, created the template for American fast food: 5-cent hamburgers, clean white buildings, uniformed staff, no tables, just counters, eat and go. Speed was the innovation. White Castle proved Americans would sacrifice everything: atmosphere, service, quality, for speed and consistency. The hamburger became the perfect American food: portable, cheap, customizable, fast. By the 1950s, hamburgers had shed their German origins entirely. They were American, pure American. So American that McDonald's could export them worldwide as American culture. The German immigrants who brought Hamburg steak would never recognize what it became: a beef patty buried under cheese, bacon, special sauce, and marketing. But that is the American way. Take an immigrant food, transform it beyond recognition, then sell it to the world as originally American. Number 14, egg rolls and egg foo young. These Chinese-American inventions have no equivalent in China. Zero. They were created in the 1920s specifically for American palates that wanted everything deep-fried and nothing too exotic. The egg roll is essentially a fried wrapper around bland vegetables and mystery meat. The egg foo young is an omelet that wandered into a Chinese kitchen by accident. But here is why they matter. They were gateway drugs to Asian cuisine. Americans who would not touch authentic Chinese food would eat egg rolls. Once they ate egg rolls, they might try fried rice, then maybe sweet and sour pork. Generations later, their grandchildren are eating actual Sichuan cuisine and complaining that it is not spicy enough. These invented foods served a purpose. They made the foreign familiar. They gave Americans training wheels for their palates. Without egg rolls, there might be no sushi bars and strip malls, no Vietnamese pho shops in suburbs, no Korean barbecue trending on social media. The fake had to come first for the real to follow. Finally, chicken parmesan. The greatest trick Italian-American cuisine ever pulled was convincing Americans that chicken parmesan is Italian. In Italy, they make melanzane alla parmigiana, eggplant parmesan. Layers of fried eggplant with tomato sauce and cheese. Delicious, but to people in the 1950s, suspiciously vegetarian. Enter the chicken cutlet. Bread it, fry it, cover it in sauce and mozzarella. Bake it until the cheese bubbles. Serve it over spaghetti, because Americans expect abundance. Suddenly, everyone loves Italian food. The genius of chicken parmesan is that it is basically fried chicken with melted cheese. What is more American than that? It became the template. Take any protein, bread it, fry it, cover it in red sauce and mozzarella, and call it something parmigiana. Veal parm, shrimp parm. There is probably someone, somewhere, making hot dog parm. This was not corruption of Italian cuisine. It was creation of American Italian cuisine, a new category that is neither Italian nor fully American, but something unique. Today, chicken parmesan is on every Italian-American restaurant menu. It is in the frozen food aisle. It is in submarine sandwich shops. More Americans can make chicken parmesan than risotto. It defines what Americans think Italian food is: heavy, cheesy, comforting. When Italian chefs visit America and see chicken parmesan, they are confused. When Americans visit Italy and cannot find chicken parmesan, they are disappointed. Both reactions are correct. These 15 foods tell the real story of American cuisine. It is not a melting pot. That image implies everything blends into sameness. It is more like a potluck where everyone brings a family recipe but has to make it with whatever is available at the local supermarket. The result is neither authentic nor fake, but something entirely new. These immigrant foods did not just feed America, they taught America how to eat. They introduced flavors, techniques, and ideas that seemed impossibly foreign until suddenly they were impossibly American. The pretzel taught us to snack. The deli taught us to sandwich. The pizza taught us to share. The fortune cookie taught us that endings should be sweet, even when they are manufactured. Every time you eat any of these foods, you are tasting history. You are consuming the American dream, literally. These foods are proof that transformation is not betrayal, that adaptation is not failure, that making something new from something old is the most American thing of all. The immigrants who created these foods were not trying to fool anyone. They were trying to survive. They were trying to succeed. They were trying to feed their families, and maybe, if they were lucky, feed their memories too. What they ended up feeding was a nation. They created a cuisine that is messy, excessive, contradictory, and absolutely American. These foods shaped how we celebrate, how we comfort ourselves, how we gather. They are so embedded in American culture that we have forgotten they were ever foreign. That is not just acceptance, that is triumph. So the next time someone serves you spaghetti and meatballs and calls it authentic Italian, do not correct them. It is authentic, authentically American, authentically immigrant, authentically the story of people who came here with nothing but recipes and dreams and created something nobody had ever tasted before. These 15 forgotten foods are not forgotten at all. They are hiding in plain sight on every menu, in every grocery store, at every celebration. They are so American we forgot they are immigrant. So immigrant we forgot they are invented. So successful we forgot they were supposed to be temporary substitutes for foods from home that immigrants could no longer afford or find. Instead, they became home. They became heritage. They became the foods we miss when we are far from America. The foods that define American abundance, American creativity, American hunger for something new, disguised as something traditional. That is the genius of immigrant cuisine. It feeds not just our bodies, but our stories. And these 15 foods? They wrote the American menu, one adapted recipe at a time.